Alright everyone, and welcome back to our online learnings classroom. Alright, as you can see on the video right here, as you have noticed for a few weeks already, every Friday I will try to give you the techniques on how you write a paragraph, right? So on this specific week we are going to study about the comparison and contrast paragraph. From the previous video lesson about the writing skill, we have learned about the opinion paragraph, the process paragraph, the descriptive paragraph already. So in this video, you will learn to write the comparison or contrast paragraph. And I would like to give you some reason why you need to write those type of paragraph, right? And for the second one, you will be able to learn how to organize your paragraph when you write this type of topic, to compare or to contrast between two things, how you can organize your information. Last but not least, there will be some linking word or the transition word, how you can use for comparing and contrasting the topics. So without any further ado, let's look at the general information about what is comparison and what is contrast paragraph, right? So the key information right here is that if you want to compare some things, right, you started to discuss how two people, places, or things are similar or have the same characteristic. So this is called compare. When you compare A and B, you try to find some similarity, some things that are in common between A and B. On the other hand, to contrast, or if you are writing a contrast paragraph, which means you discuss how two people, places, or things are different, right? So again, compare paragraph, you try to find some similarity about two things, and contrast paragraph, you try to point out the difference between those things. Generally, the compare contrast paragraph come together in one paragraph. So the main advantages, if you look at the example here, one main advantage of a bicycle over a car is that a bicycle doesn't create any pollution. So if you look at this example, they try to contrast between the use of the bicycle and the use of the car, okay? So here, everyone, generally, if we talk about the topics of the compare contrast paragraph, there will be two things at least for you to write about. It can be two people, it can be two places, or two things, and then you try to compare it and then try to find the differences in your writings. So here is one example of the comparing and contrasting paragraph. So here's the email that Yuko sends to her friends. So when you read this email, there are two questions to answer. So first question, what two things does the second paragraph talk about? So we focus on two things, what are they? And B, is the second paragraph mostly comparing or mostly contrasting? So how do you think about it? How do you know whether it is the comparing or contrasting? So let's break down this email address and find out the answer together. So you will understand the nature of compare and contrast paragraph. Okay, let's start from the introduction. Hello Sarifa, how are you? I hope everything is okay with you. The English course has almost finished now. Can you believe it? I was just talking to Yupei yesterday and she told me that you are planning to go to Stanford University. That's great, as I'm planning to go to St. John's University, so St. John's University. Will we be living in the same city? Hope you decide where you are going to live. My parents want me to live with a host family in the city. but I want to live in a shared flat in a hall of residence on the campus, so on and so forth right here. I think after reading the first sentence of the second paragraph, we already know what the paragraph is, right? So generally, the paragraph, they try to talk about two things. So what are they? The first one, they talk about living with a host family, and the second one is living in a shared flat in a hall of the resident on the campus. So these paragraph mainly try to contrast the difference between living on a host family and living in a shared flat families. So these are the two main points. They try to find the differences between these two places. So it is the contrast paragraph. Another characteristic of analyzing whether it is contrast paragraph or comparing paragraph, you need to look at the transition word or the linking words. So here, if you look at the phrase on the other hand, so on the other hand, generally they use this phrase in order to find the differences, to find the contrast idea, right? To point out something difference between two things. So you will automatically know this is the contrast paragraph by looking at this transition word. Okay. So here, when we talk about the transition word, you need to use a specific word or phrase in order to show the differences or the similarity. So here, when we talk about the comparative and contrastive structure, we mostly use the comparative structure to compare two things. Okay, so here are the comparisons form. We can use the word and, both and also right here, as you can see in the example. Okay, just browse through it. And here are some of the practice that you will be able to use all of those comparative structure in order to compare two things in your topics. Okay, so this is just for a short practice, so I can skip it for now. And for this one, you can use a contrastive structure. So remember, when we talk about the comparative when we talk about the comparative paragraph or comparison paragraph, we use comparative structure. When we write the contrast paragraph, we use the contrastive structure. So as you can see here, these are the contrastive. We try to find the difference between one's items to the other. Okay, so here, as you can see, different from, in contrast, however, on the other hand, which is the phrase that you use to point out the differences. Okay, so here are some practice which is I would like to skip for now. So here, when we talk about comparisons and contrast, we also talk about the similarity and differences. So here is the example, and this example will be your homeworks to do. What I would like to do to give you as homework to do is, here you can see the picture. So on the picture right here, you need to write 8 sentences about two cars. Okay, so write about 4 similarity and 4 differences. So doing so, you are writing the comparison and contrast paragraph already. When you write something that when you write 2 things that are similar, it is the comparison. When you write 2 things that are different, it is contrast paragraph. Okay, now let's move on to the organization. So how can you organize your paragraph? As I said, contrast paragraph and comparison paragraph, mostly they are the same. They are in only one paragraph. That is why we call them compare contrast paragraph, because it is only one. In one paragraph, you can compare 2 things, and you can also point out the difference between those 2 things in the same paragraph. But how you can organize that? Sure, look at this. So there are 2 methods, or there are 2 ways for organizing a comparison or contrast paragraph. So method number 1, which is the block organization. So why we call it the block organization? So if you look at this one, they compare the reading the storybook to seeing a film or watching the movies. So the writer in this paragraph, if you spend some time to read this paragraph, you can see that the writer just pick up one specific things and then try to compare both of the topics here. So let's have a quick readings. Reading a good story in a book is often very different from seeing it as a film. So as you can see, they try to write a paragraph about the reading a story from the book and seeing it as a film. When you read a story, you need to use your imagination. A book usually gives a lot of description about the people, places, and things in the story. So you can create picture in your mind. In addition, the conversation between people are always written with detail that describe how the people look or feel while they are talking. When you read, you use a lot of imagination to help see the character in the story. So here they just briefly discuss about the advantages or the characteristic of reading the story from the book. And then another block of information, they are try to contrast it with seeing a film. So however, they use the word however, when you see a film, it is a different experience. When you watch a film, you don't need to use your imagination. The picture on the screen gives all the detail about the people, places, and things in the story. The conversation are spoken out loud, so you just listen and watch. The feeling of the people come through their faces, body movements, and voice. Although a book and a film might tell the same story, reading a book and watching a film are very different experiences. See? So the block organization, they try to keep the information as a block. When you talk about the comparison between reading a book and seeing a film, the first block of information, they just briefly talk about the experience of the reading. On the other hand, here another block of information, they briefly write the experience of seeing the movie. That is why we call this is a block of information. That is the organization of the compare contrast paragraph into a block. On the other hand, the second method we call point by point organization. So for point by point organization, as the name suggests, they try to compare. So let's look at this to get a better understanding. Okay, so there are two different topics. For example, in this case, they compare Prince Diana and Marilyn Monroe. Okay, so these are two famous people, and they try to write topics about this in order to compare these two people. The organization of this paragraph is totally different from the first one that we have just seen, because they use one important point here. Okay, let's look at this to have a better understanding. Okay, so point by point organization, first they talk about the difficult childhood, and then these two people, they have the similarities perspective because they have the same difficult childhood. And the second point, they compare the popularities or who the status, who famous, the famous people here, and then they compare those two different people. For the third point, they compare the daily life, the life events, for example, the emotional problem. So again, to sum up, to organize the paragraph into the block information, you just present one people in this case. But if you write your paragraph in point by point, you pick up one particular point from those two people and compare them in the sentence, right? So to better understand this topic or this organization, I think you should spend time reading this file. I promise to send this to your groups, don't worry. Alright, so everyone seemed like this is a little bit long lesson, and you might take more times to understand this. I think I will drop this file for you to read for yourself for a better understanding. So everyone, that's it for our first video lesson today, and I hope to see you again on the second video.